Cool. All right. So this is fun with CapeSoft. I'm going to do a little show and tell. Some of the things, some of the accessories we make. Maybe you've seen them, maybe you haven't. They're all on special. That's a good thing. So this is a good time to pay attention. If there's something that's useful to you, come talk to us. Rob is there, Jeff is there. We'll be outside around the table during the breaks and lunches and whatever. If you see something that piques your interest, come and talk to us. I'm not going to go into every product in great depth. We've got like 50 different accessories now, which is what happens if you do 1 or 2 a year across 30 years. They add up. But I thought I would pick out some highlights and maybe do a few little things. Right. So one of the questions we ask folk typically is, do you make software for money? Now, not everyone does. There are hobbyists. There are people who write code for the joy of writing the code. This session is probably not for you most of the time. But if you're writing code for money, in other words, it's part of your job, you earn an income from it, then there are certain things you can do to increase that cash flow income. And that's often popular. Not always, but often. All right? The question is, do you make the best software you can make? And the answer is always no, by the way. You aren't making the best software you can make because you have limited resources. Okay, you have limited time, you potentially have limited skill set, and you have limited money. So every product we make is always a balance of resources in any business. So can it be better? Yes. I would argue every program can be better, including mine. But here's a little tip. Buying code is cheaper than writing it. And I can tell you that for free because I know how long it takes to write. I know what my hourly rate is. I don't know what your hourly rate is, but I can take a guess. And I promise you that the kinds of numbers we charge are a single 1% of what it costs to write these things. Or what it would cost you to write these things. I was kind of thinking about looking back over a long career, if you like. And every time we come to a conference, I hear someone tell me, Clarion can't do something. I'm sure you've all heard it. Oh, I would use Clarion, but it can't do this. I would use Clarion, but it can't do that. So Clarion can't do graphs. Right, I'm getting a ring here as well, Mike. Some sort of... There we go. Thanks, John. Clarion can't do graphs, right? We know that. Clarion can't do dashboards. We know that too. Maps, certainly Clarion can't do maps. Hyperlinks. Embedded HTML on your Windows window? No, it can't do that. Maybe one HTML editor. Well, I've been told that can't be done. Color syntax code editing. So you want to have SQL scripts in your program and you want to use color syntaxing so that people can see them pretty. Things like that. Syntax checking line numbers. You can't do that. Web services don't really have a graphic for that. But I was told you can't make web services. I was told you can't make web services in Clarion. And I feel the conversation ended there because, well, as we'll see tomorrow, you very definitely can make web services. I couldn't think of a picture for this. Safe, global, unthreaded queues. If someone comes up with a picture for that, let me know. What does that mean? Thread safe, global, unthreaded. So in other words, it's a global queue. It doesn't have the thread attribute. Those are what's considered thread unsafe. And so I've had people tell me you can't have safe ones. And it turns out, yes, you can. As is in your existing code with no changes to most of the code. If you've been using Clarion recently, you'll know that you can't use the paste into a password field. Right? I don't know if you've ever tried that, but you can't right-click, say paste. You can't press Control-V, nothing like that. You can't paste passwords, which is a real pain because that's very insecure to not be able to paste. You can't profile Clarion code. Lots of people tell me that this line is faster than that line, or if I reworked my code, it would go faster, in quotes. But the only way to know if your code is going faster is to profile it. Profilers look at your code and they measure how much time and how many clock cycles, literally, a line of code takes. And you'd be amazed if you have a slow process, how useful a tool like a profiler is for telling you why is it slow. And tells you that line is slow. If you fix that piece of code, the thing will go faster. I profiled a report once that was taking 8 hours to generate. And after profiling it, I changed a block of code that was maybe 10 lines long, and it came out in 20 minutes. And the user was very, very happy, because that's a big difference. That's the difference between starting the report in the morning and maybe getting it before you leave work, or running it 3-4 times before you're happy with the results. A few months went past, and then she wasn't happy with 20 minutes anymore, but that's another story. Column ordering in browsers. Something most programs can do. You can just change the columns of the browsers. You can move things around. You can decide which columns you want to see, which ones you don't want to see, and all that kind of thing. Can't be done in Clarin. Autocomplete. Definitely not. Active Directory integration. So Active Directory is a Windows system for managing very large networks. And maybe sometimes it's kind of come down into smaller networks, but it's essentially a tool that IT administrators use to manage LANs. Right? We talked about security earlier, and security is something that nobody cares about on the desktop. So everyone in our organization can install whatever software they like on whatever machine they like. There's no one overseeing that. And obviously, if you've got 100,000 people in your organization and maybe 150,000 computers, that strategy is doomed to cause pain and suffering at some point. So Windows has a system called Active Directory, which allows IT administrators to have a huge amount of control over the machines in their domain, under their purview. And one of the things they have is the ability to add users and look after users and manage passwords and all of that kind of security. And it's useful if you sell into that environment to be able to say, sure, we can integrate our login to your Active Directory system. So your IT administrator who gets the phone call to say, Mike has been fired, can deactivate Mike from the system, and Mike is removed from the whole system-wide, including your program. Active Directory integration, obviously, Clarin can't do that. Or maybe you think Clarin can do anything because it's a Turing-complete language, which is true. A Turing-complete language is just a scientific term for saying this language can do anything. And Clarin is certainly that and can do anything. And over the last 30-odd years, I've been building technology that we used in-house at CapeSoft. So I'm a really lazy person. You can ask anyone. I'm really lazy. And what lazy people do is they work really, really hard to avoid future work. And they keep doing this their entire careers until one day they retire. And they'd look back and say, but I worked harder than everyone else because I was so desperately trying to avoid doing any more work. All right? It's more work to avoid work than it is just to do it. And one of the failings, I think, in most programmers is that you're not lazy enough. All right? And this is counterintuitive. But if you have an employee, I want an employee who's really lazy, who wants to get the job done in the least possible time, the most efficiently, so they can skive off for a couple of hours. That's cool. What I don't want is the employee who says, sure, I'll do that task, and 40 days later, they're still doing it. And at no point did they say, yeah, it's a little bit repetitive, sure, but, whatever. I get paid to be here doing this or something else, it makes no difference to me. So I'm really lazy. And early on, when I was writing Clarin programs, I was starting to build them in a way in which I could take functionality out of this program and use it in that program. Mike invented supermodels before I even started programming Clarin, this idea that you could tweak it to your specification. In Clarin for DOS, especially CPD, it wasn't easy to extend the app. We had to play games, lots of games. With Clarin 3 for DOS, it became more extensible. And Clarin for Windows really adopted this idea that Clarin provides this framework into which we can plug things. It is stunningly powerful. Because I've got a program, as many of us do, that is many decades old. Right? I've been building it for a long, long time. How many people have been building the app for more than 10 years? More than 20 years? More than 30 years? There's still some hands. Right? That code still runs today. And you can take an accessory and plug it into that code, and it just plugs in like that. That's the power of the Clarion framework, which is often overlooked. Okay, we can retrofit an application that's some parts of it are 25 years old, but it gets up-to-date functionality today, sometimes with no more than adding a global extension, thank you for playing, we're done, moving on. It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. I remember at university, people were talking about what would it take to convert a program from C to C++. And it was like, 6 months to a year and a big pile of money. And then when I went to Clarion and we started moving forward, it's like, well, what does it take to move this project from, this functionality to add that thing? Well, once you've built that thing a certain way, maybe an hour. The miracle, if you think about it, is that we've converted programs from legacy to ABC. We changed the entire code base. And we complained because that happened in an order of weeks at the time, assuming you did it way back in the day when that was first new. Many of us have upgraded from top speed to SQL. We've taken an existing program, we've changed the database. We've literally ripped out the database out of the heart of it, replaced it with a completely different paradigm, SQL, and whined and moaned because it took a couple of weeks to get that done. All right? In Clarion world, we think of things in minutes. If it takes longer than 5 minutes, I'm not really sure whether it's worth doing, frankly. You know what I mean? We all have that, it's a lot of work, isn't it? There's languages where the guys are like, yeah, we're using this database, we're using MS SQL. Well, what will it take to make this work under Oracle? Yeah, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So we sometimes miss the power that's sitting there when you have something all the time, when you have electricity all the time, you don't appreciate it. Okay? We have deliberately gone out of our way for our international friends to build your appreciation of what you have at home. Okay? You will go home and you'll look at the electricity and you'll say, it stayed on all day. That's kind of cool. About 5 years ago, we had a drought here, a very bad drought in Cape Town. And people learned the value of water. It's a very useful exercise from time to time to learn the value of these commodities. Clarion can do anything. So at CapeSoft, we like to say we make the impossible possible. Dave Swindon says he remembers talking to me in 1993. I regret, Dave, I don't recall that, to be fair. But if it was 1993, we weren't hiring anyone. We didn't hire anyone for many years. We earned no money in 1993. I lived off my wife's salary. We make the impossible possible because I'm lazy and because I wasn't going to do what everyone before me had done, which was convert files at every count. You go out there, in those days you drove out there, you manually converted their files. There was a little utility called cfill. You had to manually run it. It was a fat mission. And I'm way too lazy for that. FM3 came out of that. We're your trusted accessory partner. I want to say we're the oldest Clarion third-party provider. We are completely not that, by the way. The oldest one is sitting right here. You can tell he's old because his hair's white and loose. But we've been around a while. The first accessories we sold, we did under duress because I went to a user group meeting, which Dave, I know Johan was at. Johan was at, the first time I met Johan, we were both writing CPT. You were working for Santam, I want to say. And then we met down here at the museum, the planetarium. And we swapped war stories and we saw previews of Clarion 3 for DOS and those kind of things. And I had a point and I've lost it. Bring me back my slide, John. What was on my slide?
You weren't keen to sell accessories.
We were all showing each other what we'd done. It's like, look at this thing I made. And someone said to me, so how can we get that? It was like, no, this is what we've done. It's not for you peasants. All right? And what was then FM1, it was just called File Manager. This was for DOS. And the DOS days, and I just said, oh, look, and we converted it, and there goes the data files converted. And yeah, there was a kind of, this is not, they're not taking no for an answer. They made me package it up and sell it and all kinds of things. It was a inauspicious beginning, let's put it that way. 28 years later, we've been doing this thing. And my primary role today is to build technology. For CapeSoft, CapeSoft has applications which we sell, which make lots more money than accessories do. But my job is to build technology. And we, out of necessity in the 90s, we sold them. Because, hey, if people want to give us money at that point in our careers, it was very much like, we'll figure out how to take your money. I've been to Clarion conferences for 25 years. This is the 25th anniversary of going to conferences. So, yeah, we've been around. We've got over 50 now dependable, reliable products. These are things you can plug into your application with confidence. We're not disappearing tomorrow. Stuff's going to be supported. It's going to be updated. It's going to work in Clarion 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever. Okay, and that's kind of important. Because I said it was cheaper to buy code than it is to write it, and that's absolutely true. It's even cheaper if someone else maintains it for you. Because if you write code, you have to maintain it. If you buy code that someone else is actively maintaining, he gets to maintain it. Very often for free. We typically don't charge for little updates. So like Clarion 11 comes along, I have to rebuild everything for Clarion 11, we don't charge for that. Clarion 12 comes along, that's an interesting change. Some products are going to have to be charged just because the amount of work's involved in that. Clarion 12, for those who don't know, is going to have prediction time. Clarion 12 will probably have Unicode support, which will have knock-on effects to all kinds of things. So most products will probably get through that cost-free, but we'll see. I don't know what the future holds there. We do charge for major upgrades. NetTalk we've charged, Sequin we've charged, Chrome Explorer, these things where a major amount of work has been done. X-Files lately, string theory, then we do a charge. But X-Files got its first paid upgrade in 17 years, just this year. So I feel like we don't charge enough, frankly. So what's new since CIDC 2019? In the olden times, before COVID, when people used to sit close together. So let's go through it. Reflection is free, by the way. So, hey, you can fill that out in your order form because it's free. Reflection is a low-level class library that allows you to do reflection. And in 20 seconds, reflection means that you can write very generic code on structures like queues and groups and tables and views. In other words, you can take a queue and you can feed it into a function and do stuff inside that function without knowing anything about the queue that's coming in. So it'll work on multiple queues. Let me give you an example. JFiles, which we'll talk about in a moment, or Xfiles, takes a queue, writes it out to JSON. It doesn't know what that queue looks like. It's completely generic code. It uses reflection to look at the queue. To look at the queue and say, now I understand the queue, now I know how to send it out to JSON. Clarion has reflection built in, but the reflection product is an update of that. I actually think I've got slides for each of these. I do. There we go. Reflection is also a reference implementation of extended name attribute support. So a couple of years ago, I proposed on Clarion Hub a extended use of the name attribute. Every field inside a structure has a name attribute that you can set, and there's ways of putting extra information into that name attribute that other things can see. And that's up on Clarion Hub. If you search for extended name attributes, you'll find that proposal. It was widely accepted after some back and forth, and there's some discussion with many people beforehand, before the paper went up. The reflection is a reference implementation, which just means it's something you can take and use and build on top of, or you can write your own version, or you can see how the code happens and all that kind of thing. It's used currently by Xfiles 4 and MaxQ. It's going to be used by JFiles and NetTalk coming. So it's one of those building blocks that we build on top of. You can't work for 28 years and not just get to the place where you're saying, I've got this tool and this tool and this tool, but if I smush them together with a little bit of wrapping, I get something that's way more powerful out. Send-to, for example, takes your browse and sends it somewhere. And that happened because a customer said to me, we were looking at a browse, and we got the filter just right, and we got the columns just right, and we got the ordering just right. And he said, that's what I'm looking for, print that. And I said, no, that's a browse. If you wanted to print it, we should be working in the report. And he looked at me funny, because why can't we just print that thing that we spent so much time creating? And Centu came out of that. We said, okay, well, cool. We can take a browse and print it. Why not? But if we're taking the browse and we're printing it, and we add Office inside to the mix, we could print it to Excel. In other words, take that browse and send it straight to Excel. Well, what if we wanted to email it somewhere? Well, we could take that browse, send it to Excel, then email the Excel file. And you start smushing all this technology together, you get something that's more than the sum of the parts. So once upon a time, back in the day, we had a kind of, no, each thing is standalone and you don't have requirements and it's all just neatly packaged. But actually, as you build more fundamental under the hood stuff, like string theory, like X files, like J files, MaxQ, those kind of things, you find you build on top of them because they add value. And they add value with less work. And again, I am allergic to work, so we use them. The downside is that if you're new to accessories, you sometimes find, I love this thing you've made. And it comes with this, and this. It's like Barbie dolls, everything sold separately. Right? And that's life. The good news is you can build up your collection over time. Those who have built a collection, I will point out that no collection is complete unless you have it all. Right? If you're missing key pieces, I know you're not going to use them, but is it really a collection? Think about that. Think about that. So X-File Reflection, there's a webinar 6:37. If you want to go and watch that, you're most welcome to. Many of there, I put webinars in for follow-up. If something piques your curiosity, feel free to go watch the webinar and do that. Chrome Explorer. Dries came to me in 2019, and Dries has worked with me before and said, he's looking for a new project. And I said, well, that's handy, Dries, because I have a project that I've been trying to do that I just don't have time to do. I just couldn't get around to it, which was to replace File Explorer, which is a wraparound an HTML OCX. In other words, it allows HTML stuff to be on your Clarion window. But it used the IE control, and IE is old and deprecated and actually soon to go away. And I said to Dries, I think it's a challenge well within your ability, man of your exceptional talent, to wrap up a Chromium embedded framework and let us use that. And if you write the code, I'll document it, wrap it up, make examples, put templates behind it. So we've collaborated on that. And it is stunningly good, because Dries is stunningly good. And then he doesn't have to do any of the boring marketing, selling stuff. We just send him money. The one thing about Chromium CEF is it doesn't require any browser to be installed on the computer. In other words, everything your program needs is in your program folder. You can put it in your install and ship it. It's not going to break. It's not going to change if they install a different version of Chrome. It's not going to, it's available on every platform because it installs as part of your program. 2 webinars on that, 553, 659. Chrome Explorer 2 came out, I want to say last year, Dries? More than that. More than that? No? This year, April-ish this year? Somewhere like that. Yeah, Easter. Yeah, this year. Hey, time flies. And we made a major step forward with it because we allowed JavaScript code to call into the Clarion program. So you're writing JavaScript inside this HTML control, which actually can call Clarion functions, which is kind of neat to be. And I said to Dries, why would you want to do that? What would they want to say? I learned that somewhere. MaxQ is really topical right now because if you've got a program or you know of someone who's got a program pre-Clarion 6, one of the big problems with upgrading programs pre-Clarion 6 is that the thread model changed at that point in time. They went from a cooperative threading model to a preemptive threading model, which means that all your global stuff became unsafe, and very specifically global queues became unsafe. And people don't want to convert because it's a lot of work to rip out your global queues. So I wondered whether it was possible to make a class that had a very clever syntax such that by changing the global declaration, but not the code, they could become thread safe. And that's what MaxQ does. It is very cool because you can take a global queue that's unthreaded and make it safe, and you don't actually change the code mostly. You change the declaration, and there's one specific bit of code we can't play the trick with, so the compiler will complain about that, and you will tweak that. And then, of course, because I was bored, I sometimes want to do things with queues, and so this was a nice place to put it, seeing as I was doing queues. So, for example, you can have two queues that are of the same structure, and you want to merge them together. Or you want to copy a queue from one place to another place. Or you want to do a set next on a queue, for example. You do set next on everything, except for some reason on queues. So we implemented set next on queues, which is also kind of cool. And I suspect any queue functionality type things in the future will just go in there because that's a nice place for queues to live. Clarion Live webinar 638 for that one. My table came out of the work I was doing on Sequence 7, because Sequence 7 was a complete rewrite for Sequin. Sequin is one of our oldest accessories. Sequence 7 was a completely new engine designed for the modern age, where there are web programs, where there are all kinds of integrations and policies and everything. I think I'll mention Sequence 7 in a little bit. And while I was building it, I was building this functionality, and I started thinking, well, this functionality is kind of useful outside of the Sequin context. I can use this in various places already. And so that kind of spun out into my table. String theory, for example, spun out of Oddjob in the same way. It's something, I was trying to do this, or Sean was trying to do this at the time, and that thing kind of happened, and that thing became more valuable than this thing in many respects. But my table is for generic table record manipulations. So it's what happens, we use it, for example, in Sequin. There's a bunch of Sequin tables that go in your dictionary, but you're free to add more columns to those tables. You're free to add more fields to them. You can change the fields. You can change the types of the fields. You can do all kinds of things. And because Sequin is using the My Table layer to access those tables, it doesn't really care. It doesn't know what the table structures are. It says, hey, you need these fields, but after that, you're on your own. You can do whatever you like. Then I started storing JSON inside the blobs, and I was using JFiles to make the JSON. And it turns out you can have these blobs as secure, so I can put the data in it and encrypt it, make these blobs encrypted. So any data that I wanted to store in the table in a very safe format where it's not visible to Enterprise Manager or TopScan or something like that, I could use this. And again, you can just pass in a table structure in a blob and say, hey, I want this. And obviously a big part of Sequin was protecting the data at rest. Because you can't, if you can top scan your user's table, then you've kind of missed the point. Sequence 7, as I say, was a very new engine. So back in the day, in the 90s really, we made a lot of tools, pre-object orientation, pre-classes. And most of those shipped as a combination of DLL and template, because that was the easiest way to make code that plugged into something. It just was. And it's not ideal, because those DLLs have to be recompiled every time Clarion goes from 10 to 11 to 12 to 13, whatever. We have to recompile those DLLs. And so the last product we made with a DLL was, I believe it was Insight, actually, in about the year 2000. Since then, we've been working quite hard to remove DLLs. File Explorer lost a DLL. No, I lie. File Explorer still has one. Office Insight lost one. WinEvent lost one. Insight lost its one. Sequin has now lost its one. There's no DLL with Sequin anymore. And because it's a big change, Sequin was designed at a time pre-web, literally pre-web. We barely had web on our desktops, never mind in our programs. And so when we adapted it for NetTalk, it was kind of shoehorned in. It was okay, but it wasn't elegant. And the world moves on. I said this morning, security is a process. So it needed a new look. Sequence 7 is that. And it's very, very flexible. It gives you a lot more power to do what you want within the context of what it is. That's a very strange way of saying things. But and most of all, it had to be backwards compatible with Sequence 6. I talked earlier about, we complain, we're changing this. Well, we ripped an entire security engine out of your program, and we replaced it with an entirely new engine with all new code, has no old code whatsoever. It goes from being procedures in a DLL to objects, all right? So it's completely different syntax. And you can do the upgrade in maybe 5 minutes. Maybe 5 minutes. Sometimes more, depending on if you've got embed code and stuff. But inside a day, easy peasy. And it will take the data out of your Sequence 6 data files and push them into your Sequence 7 data files as well. It's amazing from that point of view. What we can achieve with Karen gives us this power to do things with the template layer. We say, we take all those settings, you said the template layer, and we say, we'll keep all those settings. We'll radically change what we do with those settings. The settings are what you want to do. We've changed the layer that says how to do it. We've pulled one out, we've pushed another one in. Program just works. It works massively better, actually. And it's specifically designed for use in web apps and desktop apps, and specifically systems who are crossing over. So if you add a user to your desktop system, he's in your web system and vice versa, and you can control everything. 3 webinars on that, 563, 565, 569. Because that's how exciting it was. X-Files 4, the first paid upgrade to X-Files in 17 years. Over a year in the making, well over a year in the making. And it does some really cool things, most of which you won't notice, which is a bit of a shame, but really cool nevertheless. Support for extend name attributes is a big deal because it allows you to create structures and say, I've got this big block of XML. Well, if you just create the matching structures, the code is 2, 3, 4 lines of code to take that big block of XML into those structures, regardless of the depth of nesting that's going on. It's very powerful. And of course, because people are lazy, they say, yes, Bruce, but when you say all you've got to do is make the structures, that sounds very hard. And I say to that, well, that's very cool, but if you go to capesoft.com/xfilescode and you paste your XML in there, it'll write the structures for you. And then it'll write the sample code for you. And then it'll show you how to use it. And really, you end up saying, I've got XML, I pasted in there, block of code out, and it just works, and I move on with my life. And as we're doing a lot of integrations these days, which means a lot of work with APIs and XMLs, transfers, and stuff like that, this makes it really good. I put this tool up there when I released it, and I didn't really think about it terribly hard, because what a whole bunch of people did, remarkably, like everyone did the same thing. They exported their dictionary to a DCTX, and then they pumped their dictionary. I should have logged them all. I would have everyone's dictionary. And then they pumped their dictionaries in there, and they were like writing to me saying, it doesn't work. And I said, okay, can you send me the XML file? Sure, it's 32 megabytes. How do you want it? And it's like, okay, I didn't really plan for, on the server side there, the tool is like, I just threw a field on a form, 64K is enough, that kind of thing. Yeah, I was thinking APIs mostly, not dictionaries. But I'll make it bigger. So it's a string theory object, and you can pump up a gigabyte file if it makes you happy. It's a lot of code at the end of but you end up with lots of structures. And that's at capesoft.com xfiles code. In fact, there are 3 code writers. JFiles code has been around a while. It does exactly the same thing with JSON. People say, I get this JSON back from my API. What am I supposed to do with it? Well, you paste it in there, and that will write the current structure for you, and then it'll write the JFiles 2 code for you, which is typically 2 or 3 lines of code of how to get that JSON into the structure, or vice versa, how to get the code, how to get the data out of that structure into JSON. Just like that. And you're the first to find, you're the second to find this out. Because I did first I let some alpha people know about it. But then I did mention it at the DEF CON in Argentina this year, in May. I attended online, and I mentioned to them that curl code exists. And Ted is going to be doing a whole session later this week on how we wrote it. Ted did all the heavy lifting. Now, you're spotting a trend here, by the way. Ted did all the heavy lifting for curl code, And it's basically all APIs tend to give you an example. Andy showed you one earlier with a curl line. Curl is a command line web client, for want of a better word. And it's a very defined thing because it's all command line parameters. So you take that curl statement, you paste it into curl code, and your network client code comes back. We'll see more of that tomorrow. But it's also very cool. I expect we'll add more of these, actually. I'm getting quite a taste for them. There's certainly a place where you start saying, I've got this data, throw it in something, and out smushes something else. It's very cool. And the one Ted wrote will work with any web client software. It can be plugged in. At the moment, it's only got NetTalk, because NetTalk is always the first hit. But other inferior products can also plug into it. One of my personal favorites. I could go through 50 things, right? And you'd all be bored to tears and begging me to stop. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hit some highlights here. Those were the new things, by the way. But what about the oldies? What about the ones that are my favorites? So there's three which I consider to be no-brainers. I shouldn't have to sell this to you at this point in time. You should have these. If you don't have these, you are very sad. You should be very sad, right? Brown face. String theory is a string class. Now, you all know strings. Karen's got string functions. It's got a very nice data type called string. You can do things like in-string and sub, length, clip, a few others. Left, right. Yeah, 10, 12 things, right, that you can do to the string. Say again? No, we'll talk about Unicode, but you can't do that with a Tarrant string. Upper, lower, any more? No, there's no find and replace in Tarrant string. I'm talking about Karen. I did say sub. You can slice it as well. I'll give you sub and slice, right? So the string theory class started out had a torturous beginning. Someone asked Sean, one of our guys who worked with us, said to Sean, I want you to do X, and I've been searching around, and here's some code which included this little string library. Sean just used it in that project. And then he had to do he had to do odd job, which is another thing. But he was working on odd job, and he said, that string code is very nice. I'll bring that and put it in. And that's great. And then we sold odd job. And then it was like, but that string stuff is actually quite handy. We could use it in other places. So it spawned out into string theory. And a little later on, I got a little note from Rick Martin that says, that string theory thing that you're selling, that's being lifted from Clarion Mag. Rick Martin wrote a string class and published an article on Clarion Mag, which is an old Clarion magazine online. And it was like, maybe. Strings. I mean, there's only so many ways to do things. But what gave it away was the comments. It was very much the same code. Very much the same code. I took one look at it and go, yeah, that's the same code, because the comments are the same, and nobody writes the same comments. And so I went to Sean and said, where did this come from? Oh, no, this came from so-and-so, who wasn't a Clarion programmer, just a guy. And Sean thought nothing of it and used it. And it was kind of one of those, when it came in, it was fine, and because you're allowed to use it from Clarion Mag, but by the time it went through years of came out as a product. So we did a deal with Rick, and I give him more attribution for it. Today, it's the single most useful thing I use, period. There are over 200 methods in there of what you can do with strings. Some of them you will never use. Others are so powerful, I use them non-stop. Absolutely non-stop. Find and replace. In-string, much better. Split. I'll mention these things. I won't even tell you what they do. I'll just tempt you. It's like a menu where they say, a soup's on a pea soup. Right. 200 methods. Every single thing I do with strings ends up in here because I'm lazy. And those 12 lines of code that I have to write once, I never write twice. Okay? It goes straight into string theory. Base 64 encoding. URL encoding. Base 85 encoding. Who ever heard of that? But hey, it's in there. ASN encoding. ASN decoding, which, by the way, is a barrel of laughs. String theory, you need it, get it, learn it, use it. Here we go. You're going to buy it because absolutely everything else pretty much uses it, and I spend my life ripping code out of stuff and replacing it with string theory code in accessories, because I get this much code down to this much code down to this much, over and over and over again. It's depressing how useful it is. It's a no-brainer. Absolute no-brainer. I shouldn't have to sell it at all. You should all just say, yeah, I've got it, moving on. ABC defaults, by the way, you should get because it's cheap. It's like $10. But it does two really important things. Who's all using SQL? Okay. In SQL, there's a little corner case in Karen where if you use an open and it doesn't quite make the open work, it can drop your table from the database. Has anyone encountered that? Yeah, it's a fun day at the office when that happens. Okay? And ABC defaults tweaks some ABC default some properties and basically tells the file manager layer for your SQL tables only, if it's not able to open the table, do not create it. Okay? That's very important. Because if it executes the open and the open fails, if it open fails the right way, it'll say, oh, that's cool, let's create the table. The create command does a drop. Okay? Which is maybe exactly what you want in some cases, but it's almost never the case. So ABC defaults you drop in and just makes that whole problem go away for the SQL stuff. It's a big deal. The other thing it does is it works around a bug in the file manager class. And I'm very bold to call this a bug because we've had stand-up fights on the news groups about whether it's a bug or a feature. There are asserts inside the file manager class which say things like, hey, you're not allowed to call close because you're supposed to use the ABC close method. Fair enough. Except I opened it with a call to open. I didn't open it with a call to ABC file manager method, and I did that on purpose for a reason, and now I call close and it whines and pops this assert. That assert is there for people who are converting from legacy to ABC. It's 2022, not 1998. That assert does not need to be there anymore. Soft Velocity agreed with me that the assert didn't have to be there, so they put a little property in the class saying, don't assert on close misuse. Very cunning word. And then they defaulted it to false. Right? No, in your code, you can go through for every table, one at a time, go to an embed point right in there, self dot, do not, whatever that thing is, do not assert on close misuse equals true. Or those of us in the template world go, well, that sounds like a lot of work. We'll write that much template to do it for us. And it's in ABC defaults. ABC defaults is charityware. We give away the proceeds. And it costs you $10 whole dollars. Everything, when I say whenever I talk prices, I'm always talking dollars. Sorry for those of us who are mostly in rands these days. $10, it's about 3,800 rand. $10, it's less than a tank of petrol, right? It's cheap at the price. Cheap at the price. And FM3, if you're using top speed and you're not using FM3, please, well, let me ask, who's using top speed files without FM3? All right. We need to chat at some point because you're clearly not lazy enough and you like working. So
we did buy it, but in the
well, as long as you bought it, I don't care. I can lead a horse to water, but you can't kick him in the nuts when you get there. I'm just saying. Right. No, look, use it, don't use it. Right, almost no-brainers, things which I consider, they're not no-brainers, but it's a step up. It's not a big step. NetTalk Desktop, at least desktop level, just allows your program to talk to the world. Who knows what it might want to say? I have some suggestions in case you want to know. JFiles does JSON, Xfiles does XML. How you exist in the current world without JSON, XML, and TCP/IP, I don't know. You're welcome to use the stuff that's in the box, by the way. Clarion does come with an XML class. It does come with a JSON class. It even comes with a system string class. And it even comes with some TCP/IP client functionality. You're welcome to use all of that. Once you've wasted a whole bunch of time, feel free to fill out the order form. But you will miss the special pricing by then, so you can save a lot of time and effort. John once said to me, no, he's building one of his things, and he's going to make it work with I want to say system string class. And he tried for about a week and then said, well, it's moved on, it requires string theory, and life is too short to be rewriting string classes. String theory is faster and has no bugs. I say that. We offered a bug bounty, and precisely one person found a bug. And he cheated. The only person who found any bugs at all was Jeff Robinson. And Jeff Robinson has written a chunk of the code. So, Sequin 7 is the other one there. If you're using Sequin at all in your applications, then I know it's a big jump to Sequin 7 in terms of like the world is changing, but it's a very, very important jump because the security is just different now to what it was in the Sequin days. And Sequin can only go so far. So that's a really, really big jump. If you're not using security at all, Sequin 7, probably also a good one for logins. Massive amounts of flexibility with your logins, integration with Active Directory if you want it, integration with multi-factor authentication if you want it, second factor authentication, email, SMS, that kind of thing. And it's all up to the client. They can choose what they want to do, and you can have different systems with different clients. It's very nice piece of work, if I say so myself. If you have a desktop program, these are the ones I would consider to be bang for the buck, right? They take no time to implement. They cost relatively little money, really. Some of them less than others. And they give you huge interface updates. So really big improvements for very little effort and or cash expended. So Premiere is a print previewer. Is anyone still using the print previewer that comes with your default Clarion program? You know, when you click report and that thing pops up with a little red cross in the top left corner? Don't be shy. Put your hands up high. All right? Yeah. Okay. Premiere, just stop using that thing, please. I mean, just use Premiere. It's a little bit of money. You put it in. You drop it in. Your users will thank me later. Actually, no, they don't. They thank you, and you look like a hero, and you did nothing, right? You don't deserve it. Say again? Everything we do supports legacy apps and ABC apps. Everything all the way through. There's no exceptions, except one. And I wonder if you figured out which one it was.
ABC defaults.
They're very good. Clues right there in the name. ABC defaults doesn't work in legacy programs. Not least because the functionality doesn't apply, but also because the clue's right there in the name. Paste allows you to paste passwords into password fields. This is very important, actually. There was a time where it was considered a bad form to allow people to paste passwords into password fields. Because then people would copy their passwords to the clipboard, and other software on the machine could read the clipboard and then see your password. The problem with that theory is twofold. First is, you've already copied it onto the clipboard before you discover you can't paste it. So kind of locking the stable door after the horse is way left. The second thing is, if you can only enter passwords that you type, your password has to be typable. By which I mean it's a word or a phrase or something you can easily type. And those make for really, really bad passwords. Good passwords are long strings, 20 characters long, random. Complete random stuff, but you can't type that. So you like uppercase, lowercase. 20 minutes later, you're still typing, no, not accepted. Oh, I made a mistake. Right. So people don't use good passwords because they have to type them. So it's got a twofold thing. Clarion came along, I want to say Clarion 10. One of the Clarion 10 builds came along and said, whoa, great new security feature, can't paste into password fields. It was like, that was a good security feature in 2005. Not so much now. And I had a discussion about it on the news groups, and Parspace popped out. I think we might have written it during a webinar, as I recall. It's very small. It's very simple. And allows you to paste passwords into fields. So you can use strong passwords, and your program behaves like every program known to man. Any font. Oh my word, don't get me started. Who's still using the default Microsoft sans serif 8-point fonts that came out in 1990s 5. Right. It looked good then. I don't know why it's changed. Okay. All I'm going to say is that people who love it are like typically the older end of the spectrum. Okay? If your target market are computer geeks who are 70 plus, maybe it's a good font to choose. If your target market is anywhere outside of that, please stop doing that. But I know why you do. Because if I say to you, no, you need to go change all your windows to use the modern font, which is Segoe UI 10 point. 5 years ago it was Tahoma something, or Calibri, and then before that was Tahoma, and it changes every 5 minutes, right? And you've got 1,000 screens in your program, easy. Easy. And you're thinking, I ain't going through that to change the font. Bruce can dream on. Well, I have great news for you. For a small yet significant amount of money, you can use any font. You drop in a global extension, and your whole program changes at runtime. Plus, you get a feature. Your customer comes along and says, your fonts are too small for me because you're coding happily in 8-point font on a tiny monitor, and they can't read it. So one of the things it does is it lets users choose which font to use, their preference, their preferred font, which may be MS Sans Serif 8-point, but I suggest isn't. They could even use Comic Sans, which, hey, everyone to their own. But more importantly, it makes things bigger. I've had people write to me and say, that feature changed someone's life because they put any font into a program, and one of their customers came back to them and shared all the glory because suddenly they were able to make it bigger. I said to him, do they know Windows will make it bigger? Yes, but they don't do that. But his program was suddenly bigger and they could read it, and they were very happy. So a small percentage of people, but it's kind of nice to get feedback like that. Run screen. Run screen allows you to select which columns in the browse are visible and in which order as a user. So instead of having fewer columns in a browse, you can now put all the columns in your browse, and the user can decide which ones they want to see and which ones they don't want to see. And you can hide a bunch by default. Excuse me. More desktop interface sent to you. Oldie but a goodie. I talked about it earlier. Take your browse and send it somewhere. Lots and lots of different places. iDash is for dashboards. Hey, we want dashboards. Dashboards are kind of a thing, aren't they? It's like, oh, we want a dashboard. We want to see little graphs and little widgets and text boxes and gauges and all this, showing how much money we've made this month. iDash, very popular for that. Inside graphing for graphs. Some of these are quite old. Who wants to hazard a guess when iDash came out? A recent product of ours, by the way. It came out in? Rob, want to throw a number out there?
4 years ago.
4 years ago. I've got 2018. Any advance on 2018? Jeff? 2013. It's almost 10 years since we released iDash. And that blows my mind because I consider it to be a new product. It's only been around 10 years. Inside Graphing's been around a lot longer. That came out in 2000. And it just does graphs. It just does graphs. Lots and lots of great graphs. And here's a toss, just one thrown out there. It's not for selling. If you want to make your program look better, use a decent set of icons. There's the single biggest bang for the buck you will ever make in your program. Go get Syncfusion's, what was the name again? Metro Studio. You get all these icons. Take a palette of 4 or 5 colors. Generate all the icons you need for your program, put them in there. Nothing will make a bigger difference than changing the fonts and changing the icons. When people say a program looks old, there are 2 things about it that look old. The fonts and the icons. And the user can't tell you that's why it looks old. They don't know why it looks old. It just does. But those are the 2 things. And we don't even sell icons, so you get that completely for free. A good icon set will take you a couple of days to put together, and you can use it forever. If you're doing integrations, network desktop, JFiles, Xfiles, string theory, these are the building blocks of integrating with anything and everything. Web servers, well, network 12, duh. That's obvious. If you're doing web servers, you'll also have message box or want message box and self-service. Message box allows you to intercept the current message command On a server, you don't want that message box to pop up because there's no one there to see it and press the OK and make it go away. And so it effectively does what we call leaks a thread. That thread just sits there, lives forever, till the machine runs out of threads or the program runs out of threads. So use message box. And self-service allows your program to run as a Windows service. A Windows service is a program that runs when your machine boots. It doesn't belong to any user. It sits there quietly in the background. It's completely invisible. In fact, it cannot be visible. It just sits there and does something. So typically, you would make a web server into a service so that if that server is rebooted, your program runs. Make sense? No one has to log in and make it run. All right, let's look forward just a touch. Network 14 is on the horizon, and it's about as far forward as I'm looking right now. A bunch of code has already been done. I don't know when that's coming out. All my energy has been put into this. After this little shindig, Network 14 is the next thing that gets a look. Plus all the maintenance of all the things that are happening behind the scenes. Are there any questions on any of this so far? Yeah. Yes, James, hang on.
Yeah, Bruce. Yeah, you made my day with that statement. And cheaper to buy code and to buy code and to
write it.
Yes.
Cheaper for you, more expensive for
you. Yes, I'll tell you my challenge with doing jobs. Sometimes what has been useful has been the examples that come and the webinars and the documentation. These are the three areas. But sometimes you don't get what you want. You need to go hand.
Yep.
Yes, and time is of essence.
Yep.
But I realize there's no place I can go within CapeSoft support for a fee to say this is exactly the set of things I want. And an example snippet is done. That for a fee.
Yes.
And that is the kind of service I'm looking for.
Yes. So we do occasionally do support on a contract basis. Very rarely, actually, because if you send me a mail, I'll send you a reply for the most part. And the reply might be, yeah, I'm not going to write it for you. In which case, that's when the fee thing comes in. But between the open webinars and the forums, there's Network Central, there's Clarion Hub, there's a Skype group. If you're not on the Skype groups, by the way, there's 2 Skype chats that run 24/7. Usually a name chatter, but that's where you go ask a question if you want an immediate answer. I hang out there, lots of guys hang out there that'll give you an answer around the clock. And sometimes it's the right answer even. Sometimes people are being helpful, which is great. But yeah, we do occasionally, but usually it's often more useful. I know this sounds bad, but it's often more useful for you to get the answer and actually get that answer digested and say, oh, can you do this for me? Which I can. But the next time you need it, you still have to pay again and again and again. So I try and balance that. I prefer to kind of upskill people and say, come on, you know how to do this. But you're right. Sometimes a specific example can be handy. Unfortunately, they can be expensive because it's often the case if it's not a simple answer, it's a complicated answer, and then it takes time.
I just want to talk about it. Yes, so this is it. Most of the time, I want to ask and I want you to charge. So
yes.
We pay for it. So exactly that. Because sometimes it could take several months for little things.
Yes.
Though at the end of it, you figure it out. But
now the best answer to that is every Wednesday we do an open Clarion webinar.
Yes.
So you shouldn't take several months. It should be maybe 3 or 4 days up to next Wednesday. That's your first protocol. Because that's where we get every week. Andy, myself, John, Mike, often there, answering questions. We get other folk in who, sometimes there's a question and we go, yeah, I don't know the answer to this, but like Jane will know the answer. And then someone will Skype Jane and say, hey, can you drop in and answer this question? Open Clarion every Wednesday at 5 p.m. South African time. during the American summer, the 8 months that lasts as their summer, the Canadian summer, I should really say. And it's 6 p.m. for the others. And I know it's a little bit late for us in here, but it's not as late as it is for the poor Australians. So, for them it's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's less obvious. But absolutely, Open Clarion Webinars is a place your first port of call for questions. We're there, we're ready to answer questions, we can see your screen, we can have a dialogue, we can get very, very quickly through it. Absolutely. Yeah. Skype chats is another one for instant, but email also works, newsgroups works, Clarion Hub works for those who want to know clarionhub.com if you like web forums. Very useful. Make use of these resources, really. They are very, very valuable. Right, now to the good news. Oh, we've got another. I wondered, Tass, if you were going to ask a question, because I feel like it's been a while since we chatted.
Run screen.
Yes.
Where it stores the information when we...
It's a table in your dictionary.
So we need to add a table in the dictionary.
Well, you import it. I give you the structure. So you can import it, and then you can make that in your SQL database or your TopSpeed. Wherever you store your data, you store that.
And once user hide a column, how they bring it back?
So if you right-click on the header, there's a select columns. It's just like in any program. If you right-click on the header, select columns, up pops that little window, and they can pick and choose. They can change the order. They can lock a field. They can do all kinds of things.
Thanks. I ask question when I need to.
No, I once upon a time said there are no stupid questions. Only stupid people. The stupid questions are the ones you don't ask, right? And if you have questions, obviously I'm here all week, naturally, so you can come and ask me. So I was saying, with the magic of my fingers, he's smiling because he's like, nah. Everything's on special. It's around 20% off. So this is a good time to do it. And when I say it's for everyone, you can be on-site, online, unregistered. You'll also get your 20% off. So everyone gets 20% for the next 4 days. If you need longer than 4 days, just mail me and let me know. There are order forms. I believe, Jeff, everyone's got an order form. There are more order forms. You can come talk to me. You can go to Clarion Shop and just fill your order straight in there if you like. Susanna will take the 20% off and process it for you. All right, any other questions before we go? William. Here, Jeff?
This is a bit of a 101.
They're always 101.
Yeah, 101s.
Is it on, Jeff?
I just talk, eh?
There we go.
So we are a TPS user.
Yes?
And we want to move.
Yes.
We think we have to move. So Postgres or SQL?
Well, Postgres is SQL. You mean MS SQL?
MS SQL,
yeah,
yes.
Okay.
What templates would you recommend if we go the Postgres route?
Well, FM3 does do top speed to SQL. It helps with that conversion. Yeah. It helps a lot with that conversion. Typically, after everything's converted, most SQL users, once they get experience with SQL, prefer to have more control, and so they then take it out. But actually, during the conversion phase, FM3 is a good thing, especially if you're on top speed. You've got to get it in before you start doing the conversion. That's important. So it's got to be in the top speed version, and then go to SQL. And it supports both Postgres and MS SQL, so whichever direction you go, it will help you there. As you learn more and more SQL, you'll take on more and more of that responsibility yourself. But certainly during the transition phase, it helps you skip over a bunch of things that you can come back and learn later. Yeah.
Well, we have it, so that's fine. Thank you.
There you go. See? Just got to use it. I can only get it to you. Tess.
A profiler. Usually in SQL, we use profiler to see what I saw here that what is slow. Then there are more options, suggest me or advise me, and it creates some scripts and it makes everything very fast.
That's very nice.
Is there anything?
No.
Okay.
No. Absolutely no. No. It tells you this code is taking this amount of time. You can sort by time taken and say, okay, this is the area I should spend my time working on. Why is it going slow? Understanding why it's going slow. Is it the wrong algorithm? Are you using a bubble sort, or you should be using a quick sort? Is there a fundamental change? Is it just, hey, it's slow because it's accessing the database? Now, does that mean we need a faster connection to the database? Does it mean we need to do a little bit less access with the database? Maybe we need to do some caching. It gives us information. If we know why it's slow, then every solution is as unique as the problem. I've discovered in one program, there was like a thing, and I was like, okay, this was way back in like 2008, 2009. Why is this block of code running slowly? And if you just look at the block, there's 10 suggestions, but all of them were wrong. It was running slowly because one of the strings was being clipped. That's all it was. It just happens that that string was several hundred megabytes in size, and the clip took a while. And we took the clip out, and the thing goes from running in minutes to running in sub-second. We could have done all the other things, which do technically make it faster, but they weren't the thing that's making it slow. You know what I'm saying? So someone will say, oh, you should declare your variables comma auto. Does it make it faster? Technically, yes. It uses fewer clock cycles to do that. But unless those are the clock cycles that are perceptible, changing it makes no difference whatsoever. Does it go faster? Yes, but you can't tell. No, the profile is there to find out why is it slow. Until we know why it's slow, very specifically, we're not fixing the right thing.
Where it is slow, but to solve, we need to see in the code what.
Yeah.
So it doesn't suggest anything for the database, or you need to add this key or something.
No. No, it's not a code. It's not a Clarion better crumbs. If I had one of those, I'd just let it write all my code. No, unfortunately, no.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Pleasure. All right, any other questions? No. Yay! Day one comes to a close. We can all go pass out quietly somewhere. Do make use of networking. Okay, this is an opportunity. Everyone's going to eat tonight. Make sure you go eat with someone. Make sure you grab them. There is a WhatsApp group. If you're not on the WhatsApp group, come see me. I can get you added to that. We're only together for a few nights. Take advantage of it. Thank you very much. And roll call.